welcome to Crown and Connections with Rob Clemens. It is a beautiful day in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. A little bit chilly today, actually. Unseasonably cold, some might say. But we are today talking about economics. We're talking about the state of the economy. We're talking about inflation, all kinds of beautiful things. So when I thought about these topics and things that a lot of people want to hear about, I was like, who better than Dr. Rob Salvino from Coastal Carolina University? Dr. Rob, how's it going?
Hey, Rob, very good. Thank you so much for having me on. This is great to be here.
I'm kind of excited to have you because also this is unifying my vision of the Rob and Rob show. I always need another Rob, so, here you go.
R&R, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Little R&R time, right? Well, I've known of you for years. We've talked on and off as you've done some of your speaking, and you travel the country talking about economics and things like that. But if you would, tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got to this spot.
Okay, absolutely. So I've been at Coastal since, I think, 2007. So before I became a professor, I was in private industry in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. I started in civil engineering. My background was geology, and I always had studied economics, but hadn't pursued it all the way. And then I went to Nationwide Insurance in property adjusting, and was out there estimating large fire losses and working with contractors. And so always kind of attached to real estate, development, construction, but had just a passion for economics and growth. Really, growth was what I was most interested in. I grew up in West Virginia, but my Italian heritage family was in Philadelphia, and I would visit every summer. And as I got older, I started noticing the difference between opportunities in the two places. So more than just economics, I became a kind of a regional economist who studied places, the economics of places. And then when I got into grad school, I really got interested in institutions and like our constitutional structure and how incentives are created by the policies that you have as a nation, for example. But then probably more importantly, as a local place, local policies differ quite a bit, and you'll see people move around the country to get to places that seem to, match them up better with the opportunities they're wanting to achieve or pursue. And that's what I spent a lot of time just studying, and that just kind of led to real estate programs at Coastal. It started with entrepreneurship. I was involved with some of the business startup programs for academics and working with some folks out in the community who were really into, new ventures, that type of thing. And, so we built that into a pretty good program at Coastal. And then it was time for me to maybe look at something else. And real estate was just a no-brainer for this area. So it's been fun. We've really grown it quite a bit. And it's still growing, still looking at adding new programs. And so that's it. Yeah.
Well, I'm a Coastal grad myself, and the school has grown so much over the years. I sometimes tell the story of, when I first came to Coastal, they were at the kind of the start of their growth program, I think, and early on, though, not a lot of people had heard about it.
Yeah.
And I graduated a little bit before the football program actually started. The football did so much to put it on the map, but I was always amazed at the commitment of Coastal to constantly growing and offering more. So when I think about yourself and number one, you said a couple of really interesting things there. You talked about, we're in an area where there are a lot of transplants to this area, right? So you're looking at the difference of the way people were in one spot. Now they're coming down to Myrtle Beach, and we're talking about students. We're talking about people who are moving down here. Tell me what and before I get too far, so your family, Philadelphia, Italian family, do they do the whole, hey, we're going to get together and just eat like for 2 hours straight or whatever?
It's so great. I listen to a comedian, his name's Sebastian Maniscalco. He's funny as anything, and he talks about this, the Italian family. I have a small Italian family, and my grandmother passed away. I was probably 21 or something when she passed away, but when I would visit, absolutely, she'd make the whole entire spread. I have a cousin, his name's Tony. Every one of my male cousins or uncles are named Tony, right? I'm Francis, actually, Robert Francis.
You're
my
legit.
brother's Tony. Everybody's Tony. Right. Me and my father were Robert Francis. But eating was certainly a huge part. I wish I could say, as Sebastian says, we had this grandmother in the basement shoving out lasagnas, right? Yeah.
Right.
But it wasn't quite like that, but definitely food's a huge part, and it's a huge part of I love food. There's no question.
As you talk about the differences in economics from one place to another, you could probably talk about the differences in food because, my dad was Air Force, so we moved around, but my grandparents are from here, and when you're in the South, it's a lot less of that. It's a lot more like fried chicken, fried pork chops, fried everything, whatever it is, what I mean? So there would be an interesting study there, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, food's all over. And, we were talking before we came on. My oldest daughter graduated from Coastal, moved out to Tucson, Arizona. She grew up in the restaurant industry. We had a lot of friends there in restaurants, and she started, I think, at 15 working in her first restaurant, became fluent in Spanish, and works for Cisco Services, the international food services company. And we talk about food a lot from a professional perspective.
right.
How Tucson's a culinary location, world historic, I forget the name, UNESCO World Heritage, I believe.
Okay.
And we talk about the different foods all over the United States, all over the world. It's you really can learn a lot. And when I first came here, I'll throw a shout out to one of our advisory board members, Buddy Hucks. So EF Hucks Consulting. When I first moved here, one of the first people professionally I met, and it was 2007, and he knew that the economy was going to crash then, right? And so we were meeting, looking at computer data and trying to understand this whole thing. But I met him for lunch, and I said, what do you recommend? And we were down in Pawleys Island, and he said, what it was shrimp and grits. And he got up and went to the bathroom, and the server came over, and I said, I'll take a fish sandwich. And when he came and sat down, they brought out the food, and they brought me this fish sandwich. And he looked at me like, I knew I'd made a mistake.
Yeah,
they brought his shrimp and grits, and I was like, that's shrimp and grits?
Yeah.
He said, yeah. I said, well, I made a big mistake. And then I became the shrimp and grits just extraordinaire.
You're like a connoisseur of shrimp and
grits.
Now.
Yeah.
It's like it has to have just the right amount of butter and the right amount. Well, a lot of people, from the north, they come down and they're like, oh, grits are terrible. It's like, well, usually it's just because you don't have enough butter on them.
Yeah, there's nothing on them.
Yeah, no cheese. Cheese is good.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Not here. Bacon, chives, everything.
And leave it to me to bring on a guy that knows all about economics, and we've talked about food for the last 3 minutes, right? That's awesome. Well, and one thing I will tell you, and you mentioned Hucks, EF Hucks. Whenever you guys are talking, and I've heard all of you guys speak at one time or another, and I'm talking about you and some of the other people that have spoken with you, such great information, and it's information that I'd love to bring to the show today. You talk about things like the economy. Here we are, we're running through a pretty good stretch. Unemployment is at a low, and a lot of people have been doing very well in this economy. You mentioned 2007, right before the housing market really took the spill, and that was early in my home building career, so I know what that's all about. Yeah. What do you think is going to be happening in the coming couple of years? Do we have good signs ahead, or what do you see in there?
Well, and it's interesting. I was nodding my head as you were saying good information because I was thinking about Buddy Hucks, not myself. and there are a lot of people around here who have, good data, good information, and a lot of experience. A ton of experience, and are beyond just this region as well. They're everywhere, and so. We're at a point, there's no question, it feels like we're at a peak, right? And so just from a pure economic perspective, macroeconomics 101, business cycles, right? The economy ebbs and flows, right? And so you get to a point where you're breaking records every single month with whether it's prices, volume, whatever. And then now you throw this inflation into the mix, right? Just the general level of all prices, wages, costs, everything just going up. And you just sit back and say, okay, what are the fundamental causes of this, and how sustainable is it, and what's different compared to the last recession we had, right? And so that's what I look at and talk to people about, because certainly we know the story in real estate for sure, the prices, the price appreciation just in real estate, right? And that kind of does move into what I think we'll get into is migration and people moving, from different places to new places. And this is one area that has attracted people, for several decades. But we certainly are, the numbers like 2006 permits are higher than they were in 2006. I think that's a warning indicator for anybody who tracks data. And I was talking, we've got a speaker in, I just picked him up last night at the airport. He's speaking today. And I was telling him about him or one of colleagues, we were at the dinner. But to bring Buddy Hucks back up, as an economist, we look at, if we get really kind of geeky in the data and the changes, the rates of change. I love to say this to other economists, say, we're tracking the second derivative of the change, right? And what that means is
beautiful.
Yeah, it's really cool. But you know what? Buddy Hucks is the one who basically said this. I don't know if he said second derivative, but what he said, I said, oh, it's the second derivative, right? And so it's totally calculus. And so basically it's when your rate of change starts to slow. And so if you're adding, permits, like your rate of growth, mm-hmm. and then that starts to go slow this other direction. So instead of looking at that peak number, that top number, well, mm-hmm. we had, let's just throw a number out there, 4,000 permits. Now we got 4,100. Now we got 4,200. What if it goes then 4,250, mm-hmm. 4,225, 4,205, right? So that's that rate of change is now starting to go the other direction. And so just the other day, national data came out on residential. Now, it had multifamily in with that. We don't pay as much attention to that here. But the multifamily was, still going up, even if you look at the rate of change. It's just going up. The single family, however, that it kind of dropped a little bit, mm-hmm. right? Not the volume, but the growth went the other direction. Okay. Right. And so that's something to pay attention to. And then, if those who are buying houses or are doing, jobs related to new housing construction, it's a question of what's different than 2007. And I think on the positive side, we don't have this speculation. You don't hear about everybody flipping houses. That's just right. Not really even been a conversation the last few years. You're
not hearing that. You're also not hearing about the 102% financing from the lenders. Right?
Absolutely. Yep. There's not these interest-only, no-doc loans, those types of things. So there is what I think has happened. I mean, we all went through the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. And there's no question. All of us can sense there is something, like if we just kind of held our hands like this and said, something's changing, yeah. Right? I mean, there is a total just readjustment of everything, right? But more importantly, in people's mindset, right? And what matters to people. Mm-hmm. I think that was a really, really important dynamic that has changed since the pandemic. And for us, it is people making the decision to maybe do something that they've always wanted to do, or maybe go somewhere they've always wanted to go, or maybe just retire, right? And so that's always been our story, right? Mm-hmm. It's even Coastal's business model. It's not retirees, but it's the same. In my current real estate class, I do this all the time. I survey my students, and I ask them where they're from, and they raise their hands, and I'll say, how many of you are from South Carolina? And, for good or bad, out of 30 students, I'll get like 5. Right. I mean,
extremely low.
That's a finance course for real estate, but most of them are from the Northeast, right? Yeah. And so what happens is people come down on vacation, right? Their parents are just always coming down here, and then they realize there's Coastal Carolina University. Now, that's what I used to say 10 years ago. Then they realize there's Coastal Carolina. That's not necessary anymore. Everyone knows Coastal Carolina University is here, right? It's its football program. There's been so much. In my time here, 15 years, it's just turned into a whole different animal. Right?
I mean, it's incredible. It just to jump in where, the little things push us so far, and you can talk about the baseball program, what it's done, the football program, and then you see these people that nationally are recognized. Like you could look at the Josh Normans of the world and go, oh yeah, I've seen that guy. And where did he go? Coastal Carolina. Absolutely. Goes a long way, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I remember, I think it was maybe 2 years ago when we scheduled to play BYU. I mean. And I'm a football fan, college football fan. Yeah. I went to Marshall University, Randy Moss when he was there, and I just love college football. And I've got a little group text of guys back home in West Virginia and Pittsburgh, and there's about 5 of us. When that game was scheduled, I had just come out of a car wash, and that game was scheduled, and I heard it on the radio, and I thought, what?
Yeah.
We're playing BYU like this weekend, right?
Yeah.
And BYU was ranked, right? I mean, it was a big deal. And I texted these guys and said, guys, this is a big deal. You may not care about it, but let me just tell you, this is a big deal. And there's something going on down here at Coastal Carolina. And then the whole, I don't even know what you call it, the WWF in the locker room, all this stuff, and the mullets, all of this, it just hit the national scene in a way. I can say there's a flavor here that people just resonated with, and it was so consistent with so many things. My other daughter, for example, she's been in South Carolina since she was 2 years old, loves South Carolina, loves country music, loves everything about the mullet, and just all that. She's just very proud of South Carolina, and it's just consistent with that. It just resonates with people, and people were just coming here and taking part and loving it. And that's part of our economy, right? And so, you go right into, is that sustainable? Well, of course, that kind of thing's sustainable, right? It doesn't matter if Coastal's winning or losing at that point, because it was more than that, right? And it wasn't just a football team. It kind of started with the baseball team, right? Yet golf, it's just almost even the way of life, right? And so certainly quality of life, right? When I came out of grad school, or even go before that, when I was in undergrad, and I did minor in economics, right? I realized this stuff interests me, right?
Yeah, you're either are or you're not.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you get the first taste of it,
there's
right?
no question. Yeah. And when I started taking more and more classes as an undergrad, majoring in geology, it just resonated with me, and I just kept taking more. And the guy that was the chair of the department said, people from West Virginia either go Route 23 north to Columbus, or I think it's 77, I should know, but south to Charlotte, right? And this is before internet, really. Before, I think I had an email address issued by the university. I didn't know how to use it.
Yeah, right.
So I would go to the library and get the Columbus Dispatch and the Charlotte Observer and look for jobs. That's what I was doing. And I ended up in Columbus, Ohio, right? But so when I went to grad school then, I literally targeted the Southeast. Because growth, that was the story. The Southeast is growing. And a lot of people don't know, but now the largest part of the country in terms of population is the Southeast.
Wow.
Right? And so you just assume it's the Northeast. You think about TV markets, but...
Thinking New York and
absolutely,
all that,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah. So it's the Southeast. And how you define that, I'm not sure if that might even include going over to part of Texas. But the South is Florida. You're talking huge Atlanta, right? Charlotte has become enormous. So it's a big market, but a lot of growth. I was just in Charlotte the other day, and this is all part of our economy. There's I was speaking for Colliers in Charlotte. That's why I was there. And guys on our board are up there at Colliers and in Columbia, and we were up at Charlotte for something that they were doing. And I just was looking around Charlotte and I thought, wow, this place is just, it's gangbusters, right? It's a legitimate city.
Oh, and I love Charlotte. When you go out there with the sports teams and the corporate center, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Yeah, and then that's all part of it. So we're all at Charleston. Charleston's another one, Charleston has become, it feels like overnight. I've spent most of my fatherhood with my daughter who plays soccer in Charleston, right? There's always games in Charleston. You go all the time. But still, it seems like it has just, there's some big companies headquartered there now. There's a lot going on.
It's one of the few places where there's big corporations and companies, but then you can still take a horse and carriage somewhere.
Absolutely.
A fascinating place.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the appeal of this whole entire region of the United States. And people, they want to kind of, I don't know if slow down's the right word, but just take in some nature, let's say, right? And it's, so you've got Atlanta, you've got the Carolinas, certainly Florida has its, whole thing. But as I said, part of my story has always been the Sun Belt. And it's interesting that Coastal joins the Sun Belt, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so when you think of the Sun Belt, that's where all this growth is happening. I have driven, so my daughter moved out to Arizona. I've made that drive, I think 5 times in the last year and a half.
From here to
Arizona,
Ooh,
through Texas,
How long's that drive?
It's a long drive. It's 30-some hours. So
okay,
it's 3 days, 2 nights in hotels. I've been to Mississippi I've learned places that are just really neat places. So I like to travel and just explore places. But I've driven through West Texas, just on purpose. Take my daughter to see Texas Tech.
Man, you did it on purpose? That's
on purpose.
I love the way you said that, because I would never do it by
right. That was, otherwise, it was out of the way quite a bit. We decided to drive to Lubbock, right? And But I gotta say, I know some people that work at Texas Tech, and a lot of people say, that's just out there. But you know what? There's just something cool to it, and there's a vibe, there's an energy. Mm-hmm. I think the whole entire south of the United States has this vibe, this energy. And so I can say, even in Phoenix and Tucson, same thing as here. Out there, people from Oregon, Washington State, California are moving to Arizona.
Okay.
And so there's an energy there that you can feel it, right?
So it's like a southern migration, basically.
Yeah, it's all southern migration, right? And the whole entire United States. It's and then you add in Boise, Idaho. People remember Idaho. And I always joke. I tell people, my wife didn't know it, but we were applying just to the southeast when I was coming out of grad school from Atlanta, and I applied to all these universities in the southeast and West Virginia University because I was from there. But,
of course,
So plus Boise State. I applied to Boise because I'm a skier, and I just thought, maybe I'll just throw that in there, and if that happens, we'll just deal with it. But
right.
So that's but no, I think the whole southern being outside, that's also something that's just part of my fabric. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people are interested in that, whether they want to be active outside or whether they just want to be outside. They're looking for weather. I mean, that whole thing we talk about, when did the South start to take off? Well, it was really when home heating and air conditioning became a thing, and you could actually, moderate the climate indoors, that type of thing. That was a big deal because before that, it was difficult to really enjoy the climate, right? And I mean, that's I don't know. I can't speak. I like hot weather, whatever. My wife and I are different. We just have always targeted that. But for most people, they like it to be a little more mild, right?
Yeah,
but so if you can move down to the south and have your air conditioning, and when it's nice out, you go for a walk.
It's a must-have.
I mean, that's it.
Underrated for sure, man. When I was building homes, you get these occasional people from the north who would be like, I'm going to turn off my AC. I'm going out of town. I'm going to turn off my AC. You come back in 2 weeks, and there's a little green stuff growing on the walls. You got to be careful down here.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, I want to run back real quick. You mentioned, did you say you saw Randy Moss in person? He was there when you were?
He was at Marshall when I was at Marshall. I had sports medicine with him, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Smart guy, right?
Hey.
He doesn't get on credit. But this guy's a phenomenally talented guy. I mean, he was
absolutely
fast,
talented.
Tall, strong. Yep. Any good Randy Moss stories?
So I also was on the driving range at the place where I grew up as a kid playing baseball. When we didn't have a field, we would go to these batting cages, it was across town in the city, very close to Marshall University. But it was for where I grew up. It was actually a drive, like 35, 40-minute drive. But my wife and I, at the time, she was just my girlfriend, I believe. We went to the driving range, right? Just I wanted to hit some batting cage and then maybe hit some golf balls. So Randy Moss is on the tee, like next to us. And Randy Moss is 6'5", and I knew him from high school. He was first team All-State center fielder for DuPont High School. And actually played with Jason Williams, who was first-round draft pick point guard.
Right, I remember this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then he was, like Mr. Basketball. So, I mean, Randy Moss was a ridiculous athlete. So I'm watching him tee off. And now golf, to me, is that one sport where you might be good in all these other sports, but that doesn't mean you can pick up a golf club and drive a ball 300 yards down the middle of, that's just not quite so easy. Right? Yeah. But I'm watching him. I mean, he's just crushing balls as if he's always golfed. I mean,
it's not even fair at that point. Come on, man.
He is a ridiculous world-class athlete. And, I said I was a fan of college football. That's one thing I liked about Marshall was we kind of like Coastal. We went from, at the time it was called 1AA, right? And now it's FCS, right? So we went from that to FBS or 1A. Mm-hmm. Randy Moss came to Marshall our last year in 1AA, and then we moved up the next year into our first bowl game, right? And so you're watching this guy. You got a stadium that only sits like 30-some thousand people, kind of like Coastal's 20,000 people, and you're watching these world-class athletes every week. I mean, Chad Pennington, Byron Leftwich, Randy Moss, and you're just watching plays that you could see it. I mean, in fact, our fraternity house was right across the street from the stadium, and our tailgates were just enormous, just simply enormous, right? And so you would go watch these games when we were just I mean, powering over everybody. We beat Clemson. We came down. My wife and I drove from Ohio down to Clemson and beat them, and just thought, what in the world? And South Carolina. I mean, it's just
amazing how a few really ultra talented people can push a whole program ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a catalyst.
So cool. And then you also, I want to take a step back to some of the stuff you were talking about a little bit ago. You talked about single family has started to level out, for lack of a better term, and then you said, but multifamily is still going up. What do you think's happening there?
So multifamily, think about the projects. If you're going to do multifamily, I mean, you're going to do, let's say, 300, 400 units for one project, right? Single family was also driven in that way, unprecedented way. You had a lot of private equity companies that were taking down entire neighborhoods, right, and saying, all right, we're going to build the build for rent model, right, for example. So that was something that you could have that number just continue to get larger and larger and larger as these companies were buying these huge entire developments, right, and getting permits for the entire development. That had never happened in single family. It was always a few, except for the spec, but it was a house here, a house there, that type, phase out a neighborhood, that type of thing. So this cycle, this boom period, was the single family was more like the multifamily in that there were these huge projects taken down at one time all over the United States, right, and particularly the South. So I think builder sentiment, for example, it's one of those numbers that's gotten a little bit negative, right? I mean, builders are a little nervous, right, because I think smart. It's good. It's good to hear that because we just at our growth summit we had the president of the Horry Georgetown Home Builders Association. Yeah. We recognized him in a Real Estate Hall of Fame, and I was talking to him about the economy and the housing market and construction. And this was back I'd say a few months ago, but he was saying people that he talks to, and we got a pretty large association here with builders, as you know. People are starting to sense maybe this is how many houses do I start next, right? If I don't have anybody contracted, I'm not starting another one, right? I mean, it's that kind of thing.
You see in the actual, and it's like I always kind of equated it to coming from the home building background and a member of the home builders. They're kind of in the trenches, so they're seeing what the people are doing when they're coming through the door. Are they signing the contracts or not? You're seeing that kind of changing over a little bit to a little bit more skepticism, maybe.
Well, yeah, and I mean, interest rates are. So when you go from 3% to 5%, I mean that is a big change in the payment on a house.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So there's you cannot remove fundamentals. I mean, an income is a major fundamental for purchases of anything, right? And so that number is changing a lot, and the Fed has just begun, right? So usually when the Federal Reserve decides to reverse course in monetary policy, and so they're trying to fight inflation like we have not had it since now the 70s, right?
What was the last year inflation by year? Like, because I've heard different numbers. What are you seeing?
Year over year, 1 month we hit 8.2%.
Wow.
Right? I think that was December number. Now I think it's more like seven something.
Okay.
Yeah. And there are forecasts that number might go to maybe 5 to 6%.
Okay.
And in the long term, forecast I have seen is for it to be 3 to 3.5%, which is that's fine, but relatively we were at 2% for a long time.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's why I say it's kind of like there's this complete reset, right? But we were watching the labor force. As an economist that has to forecast this type of stuff and track these things, of course we watch the labor force numbers. Long-term, labor force has been declining in this country for decades, right? And then the pandemic comes, and the labor force has taken a huge readjustment downward. I mean, the unemployment rate might look good, but it's a lot fewer people working, right?
It's like a different kind of problem, right?
Yeah. It's you take people out of the labor force, then you've even got a smaller labor force. Even though the unemployment number looks strong, there's not as many employed people.
Just
right?
in it
and we have, I forget what the exact number, but we're millions below where we were as a country before the pandemic. Millions, right? And so when you take that into account with the policies, the injection of cash, of spending programs to keep us from going into a recession in the pandemic, there's no way we weren't going to have this inflation, right? And I think in the talks that I've been doing recently, I've got it's a simple, we call it the aggregate supply, aggregate demand model. I mean, it's supply and demand, but for the whole entire economy, right? All spending and all demand, right? And there's no way when you boost demand so much, trillions of dollars of spending, and you reduce the supply of everything. Not just people making stuff, but the stuff that you make stuff with, right? Everything. You have inflation.
Yeah.
There's just no other way that could come about, right?
It was an inevitable consequence of this. And it sounds like, right now with 7 and 8% kind of inflation, 3.5 would be welcome, even though that's kind of high historically, at least over the last 15 to 20 years. Right. So, what would you recommend to a business? Okay. And so, over here at the company I'm with, Monarch Roofing, we're what you would still call a small business, and inflation's happening. What do you recommend to a small business right now? I mean, do we need to look at, what we're paying our people and, try to account for that? Any kind of ideas on that front of what a small business might be best served to do at this point?
Yeah, good question. So I do think that being fiscally prudent, mindful of what you're booking out, right? Pay attention to not just the volume of contracts, but the rate of, if each week you're getting a new contract and you're booking out so many weeks or whatever jobs, compare that to where you were the last few years, right? Just see how that matches up, and then think about what was different 3 years ago, maybe, right? 4 years ago. And then look at, more recent. And I think every one of us would be wise to maybe start boosting that reserve a little bit, and just prepare for if there's when the Federal Reserve says they're going to go for maybe 5 or 6 increases in the interest rate in the next year, I don't know of a time when that didn't cause a pullback, which is a recession, right? And the question is, how long does that last? What does that look like? I think a pullback this time is not going to look like it did in 2007 and 8 when it's almost like a horror movie when you say I can see in my mind the bulldozers just sitting on empty land, right? Just sitting, just parked, right? And it was everywhere you looked.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I would hope not. Right. But
I'm glad you said that, because I was about to be like, and this has been good news with Dr. Salvino. No, but like you said, I mean, maybe not expecting what happened back then, but there's ultimately a correction of some sort coming down the pipeline. Right.
Yeah. I mean, money and the ability to spend when we're the reason we have inflation is because of debt. Yeah. Right. So it levers. It literally is a lever, right? And so we I talk about my students. What's the levered return? What does that mean? What's that coming from? It's because we're using debt, right? It is a lever, right?
Yeah.
And so when that lever gets constrained because the interest rate it gets higher and higher and higher, you can't use that lever as much, right? When you can't use that lever as much, you can't lift as much. You can't buy as much, right? That's all there is to it, right? So it's a pullback.
Interesting stuff. As we get towards the back end of the show, and because I literally could talk to you all day. I mean, you got so much great information. It's one where I almost feel like being like, and this is a 3-hour podcast, so buckle up. Right. Yeah. No, because we could do this all day for sure. I'm going to rapid fire some things with you, right. And let's talk a little bit about Coastal Carolina. You're a professor out there. You started the Realtor program out there. Tell me a little bit about how that's going. Is it growing year over year?
Yeah, absolutely. So what it is it started with a minor in commercial and investment real estate.
Yeah.
So we're a finance and economics department. We said, okay, we want to start a real estate program that really focuses on valuation, value creation, and how do you evaluate assets, right? So from an investment perspective, right? And that's what the purpose of that was. Now we have partnerships with commercial valuation bodies like Appraisal Institute, CCIM, but we also work very closely with our Realtors Association. So, I mean, a lot of our students, some of the first questions they have is, when can I get out there and get my license and start selling real estate, right? Yeah. And so that happens a lot. Our numbers, they have, I think, they have grown each year, right? And then we added the MBA real estate concentration just a couple years ago, and so that's already become a pretty popular concentration in the MBA program. And now we're looking at bringing forward a major in real estate, and
Nice.
and the real estate major will be more comprehensive. So it'll be more like working with like realtors, like you said. If you want to sell real estate, if you want to be a property manager, if you want to, maybe be an appraiser and then go into commercial, that type of thing. So it'll encompass all of that. The growth potential feels like it's growing with Coastal. Coastal's growing. So we have, and the College of Business growing, right? So it just seems pretty positive. It looks positive.
It looks good, and what a no-brainer it seems like that you guys were able to bring that through, and a more competent realtor overall. You're not just going to get a license, but you're actually getting to become a true professional and understand the trends. Best book you're reading right now? I know you're a reader, so is there any particular book that?
Yeah. So one that I'm reading and reading again is the 5 a.m. Club.
The 5 a.m. Club.
A guy named Robin Sharma, who also did one. I think it's The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari or something like that, which I haven't read that. But the 5 a.m. Club is, it's all about, starting your morning at 5 a.m., right? Yeah. And starting it with a good workout, get a good sweat.
Nice.
Then do a little bit of kind of personal meditation, whatever that means for you. For me, it's journaling, right? I write in my journal and try to be consistent with that, talk about what I've done, what I'm going to do each day. And then maybe a little bit of professional development in an hour. So in an hour's time, I usually honestly go a little bit longer than that. I don't know why, but maybe I think my workouts go a little bit longer than 20 minutes. But,
right.
So that's what I've been reading about, and I actually love it. And I've got a buddy that's kind of he's always been a workout partner of mine. He's got a business, and we talk about these types of things. We talk about consistency.
Okay.
Literally. And so I noticed, I'll say this, Rob has this fantastic little gym in this office here, and it's awesome. And a buddy of mine has the same type of gym in his office down in Murrells Inlet. And I said, when I go down and see him, the rule is we got to bang out some pull-ups before we even get it.
We don't even want to talk until we do some pull-ups. Right?
Absolutely. So and then I've got a gym in my house that's it's a little similar looking, big mirror, and literally just last week I wrote at the top of it, consistency.
Nice.
And the buddy of mine texted me. He said, "You still doing the 5 a.m. club?" I said, "Every day."
Every day.
And he said, "Consistency." So and it's top on I see it right there, right? And so that's I think that's consistency in everything you do is so important, and it's hard to do that for a lot of things, especially when you're disruptions come about.
Absolutely, yeah. The bumps of life, but if you can stay consistent, it helps you grow always.
Yeah. So a simple formula kind of may be easier to do that.
Yeah. I leave it to you to have a formula.
I
love it. I love it.
Formula, yeah.
So the 5 a.m. Club, we'll definitely have to check that one out. And I guess one last one. You've seen the school grow. You talked about the numbers, and we talked about a different way of doing things since COVID came around. A lot of things are online now, and of course Gen Z, they have different expectations of what to expect from the world.
Sure.
Are we going to start seeing more and more college courses online, regardless of COVID or not? I mean, is that kind of the future?
For sure, I think so. I mean, I have taught so many different courses that are either online or hybrid. And even what hybrid means. I mean, you can ask my students this semester, what hybrid means. I'll teach a section for physical students in person, and then a same section of that class for a few students who want to be online. Mm-hmm. And as a professor, I'm thinking, okay, how do I make this the same experience for both groups of people, right? And it's really like two different classes. And so, I've done things before where I'll record my lectures, and then I'll put them on there. Sometimes what I've done this semester, because I don't have the technology for some reason this semester, I immediately go back to my office. I write everything down, and I take pictures of my whiteboard in the room. I take pictures of everything. I'll go back and do screenshots and put them on this, we call it Moodle. It's our course management system, and I put that on there. And then I write a summary of the whole entire class that we discussed in a 50-minute session for the students who weren't in there. Right. And so, but now there's like, for example, what you've got here for this podcast, this setup, this type of setup in a classroom, not necessarily this, but just recording it, making sure that it can immediately go to your online viewership, right? If you have that, that type of production is, I think what's going to become more and more necessary because there's an expectation, and as I came in to do this podcast, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, and Ed Milet is one that I really, really like. He had Tony Robbins, I was telling you earlier, Tony Robbins, and then Robin Sharma. That's where I learned about Robin Sharma, the 5 a.m. Club. The production quality, we can really do some real quality production today that wasn't possible 10 years ago. I remember when I first was teaching an entrepreneurship course, and I had 2 students. One was a baseball player, and one was, maybe a physically challenged person who couldn't be in the classroom. So they wanted to know if I would offer it online to them. So I said, sure. Yeah. How am I going to do this? I literally had a MacBook computer and I'm not a Mac person. I started in the industry, PC, but a student years ago told me I should get a Mac to try to learn how to do some of this stuff. So I would set it up on a stool, and I would I'd have a student turn on the video, and it would record my whole entire thing. Then I would go back to my house, actually, because it took me an hour and a half, 2 hours to do this. I didn't know what I was doing. And I would put it on YouTube. I would have to flip the first, it was backwards, right? And I was like, what? All my words are backwards on the, right? So then I had to learn how to change that, right? And, but so that was, my audio was, the video was terrible. The video was terrible. The audio was clear. You could hear it very well, right? But we can do better than that today. And so I think universities, including Coastal, really need to, if you're going to make it available online, you got to figure out ways to deliver that in a really quality way. And I will say, as a professor, that's not my expertise, right? I mean, we need to think about how can we bring these tools more easily, right? And make that very accessible to I mean, I call it the audience, but I mean, it kind of is, right? And it's not just me and what I see in my own classroom, whatever, but I've watched my kids. I've got 3 kids, one who went through college, and I've seen the different types of online classes she's done, and she's at Arizona State now in post undergrad work for pre-veterinary or something like that, and so I've seen the things that she's doing and the quality of the production, and I always look at that kind of stuff. And so.
Absolutely. Imagine 10 years from now, we'll be looking back on this. There's holograms.
Oh, hologram. That's funny you said that, because that's exactly what I was thinking. I've got a colleague, his name's Andy Weinbach. He's a sports economist, and we were at dinner last night with this guest speaker. 10 years ago, he and I were talking about this. If we could, holograms, right? Man. I mean, you really could have somebody in your living room giving your lecture, right? I mean, it just pop up in the middle of the living room, and you're sitting there in a chair, and there's Econ 202 or whatever, Building 101. I mean,
it goes such a long way towards having students from pasting a picture of their face on the screen and then going and making breakfast.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
I got you. Yeah. Dr. Salvino, I mean, this has been amazing today. A lot of great information. Like I said, we could go all day, but a lot of great value here. We'd love to have you on again sometime.
Rob, I appreciate it. Enjoyed it. It's been great.
Sounds great. Well, this has been Rob Clemens. We're signing out with Crowning Connections. We'll see you guys next time.